So was there a furry on Thriller Bark? I asked this because in chapter 444, we meet the Cerberus zombie. However, it's weird that this is a zombie with a shadow in it because it makes animal noises and no other animal zombie makes animal noises. So it's kind of weird that it's being presented like this. And I never quite knew what's up with this whole bit that the Cerberus is doing. But in truth, it's not a real Cerberus, as of course it's a corpse, and it's not even a real Cerberus in its representation because it's two dogs' heads and a fox's head. So it's not even a complete Cerberus, even though it's a weird amalgamation of a bunch of animal parts, right? So here's the funny thing about this. I think Loki himself, right, taking us to Elbaf, and spoilers for Elbaf, but I think he himself could be a Usopp lie because way back in chapter 40, when Usopp is about to join the crew and he disbands the Usopp pirates, right, there are two flashbacks. One in which Usopp and the boys are chasing after a dog, and Usopp says, "It's Cerberus, pursue him." Following that, the boys chase a lizard and say, "Capture the dragon." Now, here's the funny part about this. I think with these Usopp lies, we could have a circumstance in which we get a false representation of the lie, which is kind of weird to say, which is then followed up by a true representation of the lie. Because the Cerberus that we meet in 444 is not a real Cerberus. Even though Usopp encounters him in that chapter, that Cerberus is not real. And then when we get into Punk Hazard in chapter 656, when we get the full shot of dragon number 13, he technically is a real dragon, but he's not a naturally occurring dragon, which feels like a very odd caveat, but it's true. We know that the dragons on Punk Hazard were all created by Vegapunk, but we do know from the stories of Ryuma and the canonization of monsters that dragons are natural creatures that exist in the One Piece world. They just don't seem to be around anymore as far as we know. So Dragon number 13 and Dragon 21, we know were created by Dr. Vegapunk. So in a way, you can say, even though he's a real dragon, he's not a natural dragon, which in turn could make him a false dragon. In Elbaf, and again, spoilers for Elbaf, I told you twice now. So in Elbaf, we could have the real McCoy when it comes to a Cerberus and a dragon on our hands. Because thanks to Figurlin Shamrock and his sword that has eaten some sort of devil fruit, we have our real Cerberus. And we encounter said Cerberus in chapter 1137. Based on this being a devil fruit user and Cerberus being a mythical creature as far as we know, this is the realest a Cerberus can get when you're talking about it being a naturally occurring creature in the world, because that's how mythical creatures are represented in One Piece. Other than dragons, when you want a mythical creature, the closest thing you're going to get to the real McCoy is a devil fruit user. Unless, and I have to stress this, the creature is already a naturally occurring creature, because we do have a lot of instances like that, because we do have manticores and sphinxes like we have dragons. So I just want to point that out. So if it's not determined to be a natural creature already, and it's a mythical creature, the realest thing you're going to get is a devil fruit representation. But to continue. So Cerberus is the real Cerberus in One Piece so far, meaning the sword held by Figurlin Shamrock. Now, when you're talking about dragons, we get another false dragon in Elbaf, thanks to the powers of the Dragon Fruit mythical model Kirin, which the Kirin itself, even though it's a dragon fruit, is not technically a real dragon. It's more of a drake because Killingham doesn't have wings, right? But he makes a manifestation called an MMA, or just like nightmare creatures. And one of those nightmare creatures is a Nidhogg. And the Nidhogg is the only nightmare manifestation that actually has powers amongst the ones that we've seen so far, because it shoots like this weird fire lightning in a chapter. So with that being said, bringing it back around to Loki. Loki could be the first real, genuine dragon in the series so far if he does have the dragon fruit mythical model Nidhogg. Because I find it very strange that we don't have a lock on his devil fruit yet, but he was confronted with Cerberus, and Cerberus was used to maim him when he didn't accept the invitation to become a Holy Knight when Gunko and Shamrock came before him. So I find it very strange that a real Cerberus is here in the flesh, but not a dragon. And both of these lies were presented at the same time in chapter 40 by Usopp. So I could see, once we actually get to see what Loki's devil fruit is, I could see him being the first real dragon with 4 legs and a set of wings in the series. That's the closest thing to a natural dragon we have seen so far. Now, this goes hand in hand with the prediction that I made over 2 years ago that there would be a giant hammer that could become a squirrel. And Loki has that real giant hammer in Ragnir, who most likely is Ratatoskr from Norse mythology. But we shall see what comes of all this. But I do think, seeing as how we have our first real Cerberus here, we're going to have our first real dragon here in Loki, thus bringing us back around with a lot of Usopp's lies all at once. The giant hammer being real, and now the Cerberus and dragon being real as well. But if you enjoyed the video, I would really appreciate you dropping me a like, and if you really enjoyed it, a follow would be very appreciated. And please ring the bell so you never miss a Polly P Works video. And if you feel so inclined, hit that hype button with your magic hammer. I don't know what it does, but it helps somehow. With that being said, give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Polly P Works.